Throughout the Second World War, the Kingdom of Hungary was a prominent member of the Axis forces, joining with Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy. It benefited from its relationship with these nations, and more than 300,000 Hungarian soldiers and 600,000 Hungarian civilians died during the conflict. More than 400,000 Jews died after scores were deported to concentration and extermination camps, and many cities were heavily damaged during the conflict. There were a number of political changes in the country throughout the war, and one man who served as the Prime Minister of Hungary from April 1941 to April 1942 was Laszlo Bardossy. He was one of the main people behind Hungary's involvement in World War II, but after the conflict he was sentenced to death and was executed by a firing squad in January 1946, being found sentenced to death for collaborating with the Nazis and also war crimes. But what is the story behind his execution? Join us today as we look at the compelling execution of Laszlo Bardossy, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Born in December 1890, Laszlo Bardossy completed his schooling in Slovakia and also in Budapest. Whilst in the city he trained as a lawyer and travelled to other European cities such as Paris and Berlin, and he learned German, English and French. He began a career in government in 1913, serving as an assistant clerk in the Hungarian government's Ministry of Culture and Education, and he continued to rise throughout the ranks. He was then made a ministerial secretary and in February 1922 transferred to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He was seen as an important Hungarian envoy and also a diplomat, and he went to different lands on government business. But following the First World War, Hungary had lost significant territory, and Hungary wanted to regain much of its land under the lands of the Crown of St. Stephen. With this, Hungary wished to claim lands from Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia and Romania. But there were discussions to enlarge Hungary's territory and lands, and with this it absorbed certain areas, and they received support from Nazi Germany to revise their borders, and this brought Hungary and Germany closer, and on the 20th of November 1940, Hungary formally joined the Axis alliance. The Germans and Italians wanted to neutralise Yugoslavia to make an invasion of Greece much more straightforward. Hungary and Yugoslavia did sign a non-aggression pact on the 12th of December 1940, and Hungary at this time also wanted to limit any pressure from the Germans and also improve relations with the UK, who were possibly going to go to war with them. But in January 1941, the Minister of Foreign Affairs died and Laszlo Bardossy was appointed to the position. He believed that the Second World War would result in a German victory, and he quickly was thrust into the actions of politics during the world's deadliest conflict. He was told by the British that they weren't happy as they had allowed Germans to walk into Romania. Bardossy and the Prime Minister Paul Teleki met with the Yugoslav Foreign Minister to exchange documents relating to the Treaty of Friendship, but it was clear that Hungary was being manipulated by the Germans. They were making excuses to the Allies, and they were actively letting German troops pass through their lands to attack countries allied with Britain. Threats were made against Hungary if they joined in any attacks. Following the overthrow of the Yugoslav government, Hitler ordered his generals to attack, and he summoned the Hungary ambassador to Berlin. He offered Croatia to Hungary in a message to the Regent of Hungary, and Bardossy tried to get him not to join in with the invasion. However, it was believed by Hitler that Hungary would join the invasion, and Hitler regarded Hungary as a friend of his. Bardossy wrote to the American and British ambassadors, communicating the likely collapse of Yugoslavia, and many warned in Hungary about the threat and resources that Britain and America had. Bardossy said it would be acceptable to enter former Hungarian lands in Yugoslavia after the country had collapsed. The British warned the Hungarian ambassador that if Hungary allowed German troops through the country to attack Yugoslavia, Britain would break off diplomatic relations. Hungary knew that any attack on Yugoslavia would breach the treaty that they had, and the Prime Minister Teleki even shot himself, as he believed Hungary had disgraced itself by siding with the Germans against Yugoslavia. In his note to the Regent he wrote, "We have become breakers of our word out of cowardice in defiance of the Treaty of Eternal Friendship. We have placed ourselves at the side of scoundrels. We shall be robbers of corpses, the most abominable nation." But after Teleki took his own life, Bardossy was appointed Prime Minister. He remained interested in foreign affairs, and in control he pursued a strong pro-German foreign policy, and said an alliance with the Nazis would let Hungary retrieve its former lands. With this, the Germans invaded Yugoslavia, and part of the German invasion was launched from Hungarian territory. Attacks then occurred on Hungary from the Yugoslavs, and quickly after the land fell, the Axis puppet independent state of Croatia was proclaimed. Bardossy claimed to justify the invasion of Yugoslavia, but Winston Churchill held fire on declaring war on Hungary for a few months, until he was urged to do so by Joseph Stalin. The Hungarian attack, ultimately overseen by Bardossy, was described as the most shameful act of wartime Hungarian policy. Following this, they occupied lands and territory that formerly belonged to them, and these lands were then annexed. Bardossy also declared war on the Soviet Union, following an attack on the city of Kassa by 3 unidentified aircraft. He stood up in Parliament and with this violated the Hungarian constitution, declaring war without getting Parliament's consent. Britain then declared war on Hungary months later, and Bardossy also announced a state of war with America on the 15th of December 1941. But in Hungary, Bardossy's policies were rather similar to the Nazis, and he was a virulent anti-Semite. He limited Jewish employment opportunities and banned them from having relationships with non-Jews, and he also approved the policy of deporting Jews from territories seized from Yugoslavia. With this, he sanctioned the executions and killings of thousands of Jews. But on the 7th of March 1942, despite being only in the job of Prime Minister a matter of months, Laszlo Bardossy was forced out. Regent Horthy forced his resignation and decided to settle on a more moderate Prime Minister. It's believed that Horthy removed Bardossy for a number of reasons, possibly as he refused to stand up to the Germans more, or the fact he was compliant in the growth of the far right in his land. Also, he could have seen Bardossy as a reason why the Hungarian forces suffered heavily fighting the Soviet Union. But also Bardossy opposed a plan that would have elevated Horthy's son to the regency after his death. But after resigning as the Prime Minister, he then became the chairman of the fascist United Christian National League, and as the Germans occupied Hungary in 1944, he and his new followers collaborated with Prime Minister Dom Szotyay and later Prime Minister Ferenc Szalai and his Arrow Cross Party. In this, Bardossy was working alongside a man who actively went after Jews and executed them, and also his men were involved in deporting dozens of thousands of people to the concentration camps, where they were killed as soon as they arrived. But as the Soviets advanced towards Hungary, he fled to Germany heading towards Bavaria. He obtained a visa to travel to Switzerland and then lived in a refugee camp, but was then deported back to Germany and was then arrested by the Americans as soon as he arrived. He was a man who, as the Prime Minister of Hungary, was responsible for the deportations of thousands of Jews, and also he had overseen his country as they were declared war on by Britain and also America. But after the end of the Second World War, he was sent back to his homeland, and on the 3rd of October 1945 was placed on trial for being a war criminal. He was accused of being complicit in mass murder, and also was charged with sending more than 60,000 Jews to Nazi death camps. He was ultimately found guilty of war crimes and of being a collaborator with the Nazis, and at his trial he was sentenced to death by a firing squad in Budapest. He was imprisoned inside one of the city's prisons for a few months, before on the 10th of January 1946 he was taken to the courtyard of the Academy of Music in Budapest. A Hungarian official read the death sentence of the former Prime Minister out aloud, and watching the execution were thousands of Hungarian civilians. Against the side of the building, a large number of sandbags had been set up to protect the crowd and the soldiers from ricocheting bullets. Accompanying Bardossy was a priest, who remained with him until the very end, and Laszlo Bardossy was then placed in front of the sandbags. He had his legs tied to prevent him from running or escaping, and the crowd surrounded him in a semicircle. There were thousands there, and he was dressed in a suit. Opposite him were 4 executioners, the firing squad armed with their rifles, who would take his life. The priest stepped to the side to allow the shooters to do their job and to take Bardossy's life. They were told to take aim, and the 4 soldiers did so before they fired straight into the former Prime Minister at very close range. Instantly he was killed. Shortly after this, a doctor went over to him, and his death was confirmed. Despite only being Prime Minister of Hungary for a short while, Laszlo Bardossy oversaw his country's involvement in the war. In his time in office, Britain and the US declared war on his nation, and also he allowed German soldiers to invade one of his former allies, and also moved his soldiers into these lands. He was hated by many inside of his country, and at the barrel of 4 rifles, he was executed inside of Budapest. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.